Don't worry if you don't know what a Grawlix is, because in 10 minutes' time you'll be expert Grawlix spotters. Okay, now for something completely different. When I was 14, my family moved down south and we rented a furnished house whilst we waited for work to be done on our own home. I've always been drawn to other people's bookcases, so it was that within the first hour I had found this book and hidden it under my mattress, because if my parents had known it was there, it would have rapidly disappeared. They would have disapproved of the sex and particularly of the bad language. The book contains 30 instances of the word fuck, for instance. That's a Grawlix. Fuck, or the F word for those of a sensitive disposition. We all recognise what it is. It's so ubiquitous now that we take it for granted. You hear it everywhere, from the playground to the boardroom, and we hardly notice it. But that's not always been the case. And to follow its cultural history is an interesting case study in how social mores change and are challenged over time. It's of Germanic origin, so it would have been in verbal use for centuries, but it appears first in print in the 16th century. John Florian, contemporary of Shakespeare, put together an English-Italian dictionary and uses it to translate the Italian word fottere. Those of you who are French speakers will recognise the similarity to foutre, as in c'est foutu. But after Florian, it disappears until the 20th century. So people are probably still using the word, but it's no longer in print. And then it starts to make a tentative recovery in the 20th century. D.H. Lawrence hints at it in Sons and Lovers. "You shouldn't flunk your own deeds," remonstrated the man. Then Dawes made a remark which caused Paul to throw half a glass of beer in his face. Most readers would recognise that the man is making a pun, as a word play on the word funk. But Lawrence couldn't go any further than that without coming against the Obscene Publications Act and breaking the law. Another way round it was Norman Mailer. He substituted the word fug, F-U-G. There was a band in the 60s from Greenwich Village called the Fugs. But my favourite story is that when Norman Mailer was introduced to Tallulah Bankhead, the film star, she said, "Oh, so you're the young man who can't spell fuck." But Lawrence could spell it, and he did. And in 1928, he wrote Lady Chatterley's Lover, and that contains a lot of fucking, both the word and the activity. For anyone who's just newly arrived from Mars, the book concerns Constance Chatterley and her affair with Oliver Mellors, the gamekeeper on her husband's estate. There are a number of reasons why it was notorious, largely the cross-class adultery, but mostly it was the explicit sex scenes and the four-letter words. So Lawrence knew that he could never get the book published in England, and he had it published privately in Italy, in the same way as James Joyce with Ulysses. And it was distributed to private subscribers, rather in the same way as Mifan was talking about earlier. This is an earlier version of it. So if the book was unpublishable in 1928, how come there's a paperback there on that bookcase for me to discover when I was 14? We need to look at the publishing history to understand how that came about. First of all, there were 1,000 first editions published in Italy, sold for £2 each. Now, at the time, that was a huge amount of money. There were people not earning that amount of money a week. So a very limited range of people who could access that. A year later, it comes out in Paris, still a limited edition. And not until the 1930s, after Lawrence had died, is there an authorised, expurgated version published in England and the UK. In other words, a version with all the naughty bits taken out. After the Second World War, as things started to loosen up a little, there was a version published in America, an unexpurgated version. And that caused quite a lot of trouble, especially with the religious right, until a judge ruled that the book had artistic merit, because it had literary merit, because of the tenderness and the way that it was written. The decision was upheld by the Court of Appeals, and so it was legal in America. And things are starting to change in the UK at that time as well. About the same time, Roy Jenkins brought in a private member's bill to challenge the Obscene Publications Act. It was over 100 years old by then and very out of date. So for the first time, it would actually be possible to be able to defend a work of fiction. It had never been feasible before. You couldn't have there was no defence possible. So that encouraged Penguin to bring out 7 copies of Lawrence's work to celebrate 30 years since his death, one of which was Lady Chatterley's Lover. Penguin was taking a huge risk with this. Unlike in America, in Britain, this was a criminal offence. If they were found guilty, they sentenced as a prison sentence. So it wasn't done lightly. As you can see, the court case caused great interest. But the thing that mostly concerned the Crown Prosecution Service was threat to public order. Because this is a paperback, unlike those first editions, it would be sold for 3 and 6. That's less than 18p now. So that's putting the book in the reach of women and the working classes. Profanity is less of an issue if it's restricted to upper-class professional men. Men such as Sir Lawrence Byrne, the judge. He was born in the 1890s. He's coming to the end of his career at this point, and he would be dead in 5 years. So not, entirely on the ball, perhaps. And Mervyn Griffiths-Jones, Eton educated, member of the Coldstream Guards. He had a reputation as a conservative reactionary. Against these two, Penguin had ranged 36 different witnesses, all sorts of important key figures, writers, cultural commentators, psychologists, all kinds of people. Ian Foster, sorry, my mind's going blank. A range of different people, Richard Hoggart. They were not actually necessary at the time because Griffiths-Jones made such a